When Granny Was a Little Girl, The Childhood of Miriam Dumbach Charles, as told to Susan Snyder. Chapter 1. My Family. Life was simple when I was growing up. I would not say life was easy, but it was simple. I was the third of 7 children. Kurt and Caroline were older, and Hilda, Emma, Carl, and Ralph were younger. My name was Miriam France Dumbach, but everyone called me Mim. I was born on a sunny day, the 26th of June, 1920, in New Danville, Pennsylvania. I was not born in a hospital, but in the frame house where I lived until I was 5 years old. I was short and skinny with blue eyes and medium brown hair. My hair was straight, parted on the side, and worn chin length. My mother and aunts made our clothes, and these were handed down from one sister to the next. I wore dresses or jumpers that were made of cotton. There were no knit fabrics like t-shirts or sweatshirts. We didn't wear jeans or long pants, but kept our legs warm with woolen stockings and long underwear in winter. I had only one pair of shoes at a time. Chapter 2. My House. Our family moved in 1925 from New Danville to the town of West Willow, where we bought a home with an attached office that had been owned by a doctor. There was a big yard with many flower beds and a stream at the back of the lot. There was a cement wall on both sides of the stream, and I liked to play on the wall and in the stream. I also liked to walk on the iron railing that went around the property. We would swing like monkeys on the limbs of the big weeping willow trees in the yard. There was no running water in our house, no sinks with faucets. All of the water we used had to be pumped into buckets, then carried from the pump house into the kitchen for cooking and washing. We had a wooden cupboard with a bowl set in it to wash the dishes. This was called a dry sink. The wooden cupboard had to be wiped dry after the dishes were done. On Saturday nights, we would take our baths in a wash tub in the big bedroom the 4 sisters shared. Our house was heated with coal, but the upstairs was always cold. There was no bathroom in the house. We had a barn out back that had a 2-hole toilet. We had electric lights in the house and also kerosene lamps, which we used during a storm. We did not have an electric refrigerator or electric toaster or oven. We used an icebox to keep our food cold. Our cook stove was heated with wood. Our iron was electric, but the cotton fabrics were not as wrinkle-free as today's fabrics, so ironing took a lot of time. My chores were to help with cleaning, dishes, washing, and ironing. Chapter 3. Cars. In the 1920s, along with horses and carriages, there were more and more cars being driven on the dirt roads of the country. Most of the cars were Model T Fords. A car cost about $300. Gasoline cost 25 cents a gallon. My father owned a garage in New Danville, where he sold cars. Chapter 4. Playing. We knew everyone on our street. I could go down the street and name each of the families living in the houses. All of the neighborhood kids played together. We played a lot of baseball. We loved to hopscotch, jump rope, roller skate, or play hide and seek. We also used to make our own bubbles. One game we played was called Cali Over. We would team about 4 kids on each side of the house and throw a ball over the roof. The other team would catch the ball, then run around the house trying to hit someone with the ball. You didn't know which side they would come from, and if they hit you, you went over to their side. All winter there was snow on the ground. We went sledding every day. There was a bakery at the bottom of the hill where we could warm up after a few rides if it was too cold. We also went ice skating on the frozen stream in the back of the yard. The ice skates would buckle onto our shoes. Chapter 5. School. School was only canceled when the teacher couldn't get through the snow. I walked 2 blocks from my house to attend Columbus School, which was a 1-room brick schoolhouse. Children started school when they were 7 years old and could stay until they were 18. There was one teacher for about 50 to 60 children from kindergarten through 8th grade. For many years, our teacher was Mr. Dan Reiner. He was a very good teacher and somehow managed to control all of those children. When a student was bad, there were several punishments. One was to stand in the vestibule or hall. I had to do that once because I dropped a pencil through a hole in the floor. If you were caught throwing an eraser or misbehaving, you had to stand on a bench in front of the school holding a sign that said, "I have nothing else to do." Thankfully, I never had that punishment. Many of Mr. Reiner's students went on to become successful men and women. Since I lived close to the school, I always walked home for lunch. Some children packed their lunch and ate at school. There was no lunch served for the students. There was a nearby store where kids could stop for an ice cream cone if they wanted to. After 8th grade, students would take a test. If they passed the test, they could go to high school. I passed the test and went to high school, where I studied cooking and sewing and home economics. By that time, I was making my own clothes on our treadle sewing machine. Chapter 6. Hard Times. I was 10 or 11 years old during the Great Depression. At that time, many banks closed, many men lost their jobs, and many families were very poor. A person made only $9 per week working in the silk mills. My father died of tuberculosis when I was 16. I had always wanted to be a nurse and spent a lot of time taking care of my father. Life was hard for my mother with 7 children to raise, no husband, and no modern appliances, but she never complained. Our family received mother's assistance after my father's death. My mother did the laundry for other families. Each of us children worked at whatever jobs we could get. I picked strawberries when I was 12 years old. I was glad to contribute to the family income. We did not have a vegetable garden in our yard. My uncle brought potatoes for our family. My grandparents helped by bringing us food as well. We always had hunting dogs that lived in the barn. They would roam loose and have to hunt their own food. We would feed them leftovers, but of course there were not many leftovers from such a large family. Chapter 7. Celebrations. Christmas was a busy time at school. Students would memorize their short poems or songs to perform for the parents. Older students would act out a Christmas play. My family did not put up with a tree or any decorations at home. We would gather as a family at my grandparents' house. My grandparents would give each child a present. The gift might be something like material for a dress. It was simple, but good to be together. We did not have any celebrations on our birthday. There were no gifts or cake. One Halloween, I remember the students played a prank at school and pushed over the outhouse. Chapter 8. Cooking. My mother prepared many meals that were cooked in one pot, like pork and sauerkraut. We ate a lot of potatoes, noodles, meat, and vegetables. There was not much fancy cooking. There was a grocery store down the block from our house. Mother would send us to the store with a list, and we would buy what she needed. She would send us to the bakery for bread. Bread cost about 50 cents per loaf. My mother did not shop or leave the house very often. Our milk was delivered to our house. If the milk became sour, we made cakes with it. We did not have dessert very often, but I do remember that my mother made the best apple dumplings I had ever eaten. Chapter 9. As I grew up. There were no vaccines or antibiotics for infections or disease. I got measles and mumps and chickenpox like most children of those times. I nursed my brothers and sisters when they were sick and played nurse with my dolls. My best friend was Martha Yegley. Her family owned the bakery at the bottom of the hill where we warmed up after sledding. Her mother liked me, and I went to her house often. At age 15, Martha and I would go for walks up Brooks Hill and meet 2 boys who would take us for a ride in their car. When I was 16, we moved to Lancaster. There were exciting events happening in America while I was growing up. The first official radio broadcast and the first time that people in my cities could hear a voice coming over the radio was in 1920, the year that I was born. The radio broadcast announced that Warren Harding had been elected as the 29th President of the United States. That was long before television, cell phones, and computers were used by everyone. In 1942, I married L. Blaine Charles. We went to Philadelphia for a honeymoon. It was the first time I left Lancaster County. Blaine and I had 3 daughters, Charlotte, Susan, and Karen. I have 9 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. Many years have passed since the simple days I remember as a child. Many years have passed since little Mim swung on the low, hanging branches of the tree in West Willow.